Hello and welcome to AC Reads. Today we'll be reading 5 ghost stories from Reddit. Story 1. We ran out of the hotel in the middle of the night. A few months back, I went on holiday with a couple of friends to celebrate my hen do. I ended up sharing a hotel room with my maid of honour. We spent the first couple of nights exploring the town and drinking a little too much, so that by the time we got back to the hotel we fell asleep pretty much as soon as we crawled into bed. The third night rolled around and we all felt pretty rough, so we decided to take it easy. We had a nice meal and watched comedy stuff on her tablet until it was time for bed. I woke up abruptly at 2 a.m. with the feeling that something else was in the room with us. Telling myself not to be stupid, I opened my eyes and stared directly at a woman standing next to the bathroom door. The first thing I noticed about her was her hair was black and her shirt green with white polka dots. This is important later in the story. But the more I looked, the more I realised that she was all wrong. She was unnaturally tall, so much so that her head was level with the door frame. The worst thing was her face, though. The only way I can describe it is to say that it looked melted, but that doesn't do it justice. Her teeth were huge, protruding out of her mouth. She was leaning towards me, beckoning me over to her and laughing. I couldn't hear the laugh, but I felt it. Now, I'm going to pause here and say that I know what sleep paralysis is like. It's happened to me on and off since I was a very little kid. I wake up and can't move, and I see stuff that shouldn't be there, but this was not that. Firstly, I could move, because initially I thought it was a weird dream remnant. I actually leaned towards her to see better. Secondly, when I do wake up seeing weird things, they disappear as soon as I close and reopen my eyes. So I closed and reopened them again. Every time I did it, she was still there. At this point I lost it, closed my eyes and screamed for my maid of honour to turn the light on. As soon as she flipped the switch, I turned to check and the woman was gone. I got out of bed and searched the bathroom, just to be on the safe side, and it was empty. I've never physically shaken from fear before, but by this point I was trembling from my head to toe, and I couldn't stop. While I was pacing the room, my maid of honour was lying on her bed, awake but struggling to open her eyes. This was weird in itself because A, when she's up, she's up. I live in fear of sleeping in the same room as her because she's a light sleeper. And B, she's a very protective friend, and under any other circumstances, if she heard me scream, she'd be at my side in a shot. Our conversation went something like this. Me not wanting to sound stupid, I had a nightmare. My maid of honour said, "It's okay, sweetie, this hotel's messed up." I said, "Yes, I saw a woman." At this point, my maid of honour sat bolt upright. "Don't say that." I said, "Green polka dot shirt?" We stared at each other for a moment, then without saying anything else, grabbed some essentials and left the hotel. We went down onto the beach and walked through the seawater, then managed to find a bar that was still open. When we were sat down with a pint each, we finally talked. When I screamed, I'd woken my maid of honour up from a nightmare in which a really tall woman with a melted face and huge teeth was pinning her down on the bed and screaming into her face. The woman had black hair and was wearing a green shirt with white polka dots. We didn't calm down until I booked us a room at another hotel. We waited out the rest of the night in bars and cafes, and when our other friend finally woke up, we got him to accompany us back to our room so we could get our stuff and go. So that's my story. I still have to sleep with the lights on because I'm scared of what might be waiting for me if I wake up in the dark. Other interesting points to note: that the hotel where this happened was the oldest in the city, having been built around 100 years prior. When I woke up, we were 2 hours into Halloween. Some people we've told this story to have suggested it might have been someone playing a prank, but the main door was locked from the inside and it was also really stiff and made a horrendous noise whenever it was open. There was no way anyone could have opened it without us hearing. The only other entrance was a balcony door 2 floors up, covered with a metal shutter that could only be operated from the inside. Since this incident, me and my maid of honour have started having the same nightmares. Not every night and not even about the woman we saw, but once a month or so we will have the same horrible dream. and it's different every single time, but it's always the same between us. Childhood through adult years as I recount it. Rattlesnake Road is an original name to a road that has since been changed. I was born on Long Island, New York, and since I can remember, I have experienced strange occurrences. I was never able to sleep at night, and from a very young age, I was always terrified of the dark. Yes, every child is afraid of the dark, but I was afraid for a reason that I was unable to explain until later in life. There are a few stories while here, but I want to fast forward to when I was a bit older and things began to make sense to me. My family purchased a second home and we moved to Colorado. We lived on a ranch located at the top of a hill. It led into the Rocky Mountains. There wasn't much around us. A few neighbours, our barn with our animals, and thousands of acres of hilly and mountainous terrain that surrounded our family. There was a long dirt road that led to our property, Rattlesnake Road. It was a perfect shot of scenery leading up to our small 3-bedroom home. It was quiet, peaceful, but the land was old. I was about 7 years old at the time. This is when I began to understand what I was going through wasn't normal. Our home was small. It was a ranch-style house with a 3-car garage, which took up half of the structure. The other half was built into the hillside, where you entered from the front. You walked into the living room and could see straight out of the back sliding door into the plains. In front of you was the kitchen, old with brick. Straight down the hallway started my room on the right. My brother's room followed that, and lastly my parents' room on the left. The bathrooms were connected and were on the right as well, wrapping around to the back of the house. I left the hallway lights on when I slept. I was scared to begin with, but something always felt as though it just wasn't our family there. One night I was up and I could not fall back to sleep. My parents and brother were sleeping as well, which I could hear the snoring down the hall. My bedroom door was open and I was facing the hallway when suddenly the pull string to my closet made a click and the lights popped on. I could see the light making its way through the slated shades of my closet accordion doors, and my heart began to race. They shut off. The air in the room became cold, tense, almost as if oxygen was being siphoned out. The silence set. I couldn't hear the snoring anymore, nothing. I looked towards the hallway and there passed a short black static mist. It had no facial features, but what I could see was a mouth. It seemed as though it was smiling, ear to ear, which paralysed me with an intense feeling of dread. It passed my doorway out of sight, not making a sound. Moments later I heard what sounded like the door to our garage open and close, and then the air lifted as my surroundings returned to normal. I knew I was awake and I knew what I had seen was actually there. And it visited me, only to get worse and worse as the time went on. So I've had a couple of ghost encounters that really messed me up, but this one in particular was the worst. So my mum was dating a guy who I wouldn't call redneck, but not like a normal country guy. He also had a son who I still stay in close contact with to this day. Basically, almost every Sunday we would go out at my stepdad's mum's house. She lived in the middle of the woods, but not too secluded, like there were other houses in the area. But directly across the dirt road there was an abandoned house that looked pretty much like what you would expect an abandoned house to look like. So me and my stepbrother would go in there and every once in a while for fun, and we would see some weird stuff, like a random chair in the middle of the room and a cooler full of dead roses. But one day we were headed in there like usual, but once I took one step in, I wanted to throw up. My brother kept going and was telling me it's fine, just come in, but there was no way I was going in there. A couple of minutes of talking go by, and all of a sudden my brother's face turns pale as hell, and he drops his water bottle and runs out without saying a word. I follow him, asking him to slow down, and he says that we're never going in there again. When I asked him why, he said that he heard a voice whisper in his ear to tell him to run. We've never told our parents until about 2 years later, and at the time we were only 12. I was 15 when I started to mess around with the Ouija board, because it was something the neighbourhood parents would drill into our heads not to play with, so as kids we were intrigued. It was my best friend, 14 female, my neighbour, 14 male, and myself, 15 female, playing it one evening when my neighbour thought it was a big joke and made fun of us for playing. He tried to light the Ouija board on fire and it refused to flame. It just wouldn't burn at all. My best friend and I thought he was being crazy because we didn't understand the severity. About a month later, I was sitting in my mother's room with my best friend and my little sister, listening to music, because my mother had the best sound system in the house and she was gone for the night. My sister was sitting on my mum's bed, my friend's back was facing the window and I was facing my friend, but I couldn't help but notice a blue man standing outside my mum's bedroom window. My friend seen my demeanour change, and when she looked out the window, I seen the colour drain from her body as she started to cry. I left my mother's room with my friend and we locked ourselves in the only room without windows until the mum arrived. We assumed it was a peeping Tom for the longest while after this. Now fast forward to another 2-3 months after that happened. My neighbour called me and my friend in a panic, saying he needed to come over because it was an emergency. We told him to come over immediately and he did. He explained to us that him and his friends, not the best group of individuals, but given their age, their decisions kind of make sense unfortunately, decided to light an abandoned car on fire. He said he took a picture of it engulfed in flames to send to his friends as a joke, saying campfire. When he revealed the photo to me and my friend, she again lost the colour in her body and started to cry. I immediately noticed in the blue of the flame that the same blue man that was outside my mother's bedroom window. I couldn't move, speak or feel anything. He questioned us on what it was, and the only one who could make out the words for us was my little sister, as she told him, "That's the blue man that was outside Mum's window." I won't say the name of the prison due to privacy reasons, but I can say that I was a CO in the state of Florida. I'll start with my first ever experience in the prison. It was my first week, probably my third day on the compound. We have to count inmates and I was doing a 16-hour shift. During the night shift there's nothing to do, so we count the inmates who are locked in cells hourly. It was the 2 a.m. count and I was in a T-dorm. T-dorms, by the name, are shaped like a T. They are 2 stories, and I was on the second story on the right side of the wing. The very first cell I went up to, an older white inmate had pressed his face against the glass. Inmates like to masturbate to officers, and I had had that happen quite a few times in the short amount of time I'd been there. It's something I didn't tolerate, so I told this inmate that he needed to get back on his bunk by the time I came back from counting the rest of the wing, or I would make sure to throw the handcuffs on him. He didn't say anything. I wrote down the cell number and continued to count. It was the first cell on the wing, so I wouldn't have forgotten which cell it was anyway. I continued my count and went back to the cell to make sure that the inmate was back on his bunk, and after shining my flashlight into the room, I counted 2 inmates. But these inmates were neither old or white, like the previous inmate. I obviously freaked out, and I told the officers in the station once I got back, and the officer told me that the guy's name's Kevin and he does it quite frequently. The officer that I was speaking to told me that he was actually the one who found Kevin dead after Kevin had smoked himself to death on K2 mixed with rat poison 3 months before I started the job. Stories. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful day and I hope you're not too scared to sleep tonight.